Do you have that one friend filled with that random and seemingly unending amount of useless knowledge? Well, I am that friend, and if I don't know the answer to something, I'll certainly be looking it up. I love to learn, research, and share my findings. So I thought, why not share it all with a bunch of strangers on the internet? And, maybe enjoy a drink or two while we're at it. Welcome to I'm Already Looking It Up. Hey, and welcome to I'm Already Looking It Up, the podcast where I, your host, do a little bit of research on a subject that I simply find interesting or I'm curious about and tell you, all my lovely listeners, what I find. My name is Carly, and without further ado, let's get into it. So, this topic today is something that has stuck with me since I was a kid. Now, I was a huge nerd as a child. It was really, I still am, but weirdly a nerd for a kid. And I used to be super obsessed with learning literally anything I could about mythology. And that probably started with The Mummy, and we'll get into Egypt at a later date because I love Egyptian mythology. I loved it when I was a kid. I'd like to have a reason to go back and look into it again. But that is a further out planned episode because I want to do some actual really decent research on it before I talk about it. But this topic has kind of been something that's stuck with me since probably middle school, and the idea of it comes from a video game, actually, from Tomb Raider Legends. So, as a mythology nerd and as someone who ended up going into history as a career, well, not a career, but getting my master's in history and everything, I was obsessed with Tomb Raider. And at first it was just like the puzzles and stuff that I really liked. And then it just kind of became like really cool that she was, Laura was going through and looking at things that were very Indiana Jones. We were big fans of Indiana Jones as well as kids, and I definitely hooked on to Tomb Raider as soon as I could. And one summer, me and my brother had gotten the game Tomb Raider Legends, which we were obsessed with, and we 100%ed it together with YouTube game guides. but one of the first games we ever got to 100%. Other than friggin' Star Wars, Lego Star Wars, which still love that game, great game. And there's a line in one of the very first missions, I think it's like the second or third one, where she is, the main character, Laura, is looking, and it's actually Lara, but I pronounce it Laura because that's how it's pronounced in the game, because she's British, and so she says it with a British accent. I don't know. Anyway, but it's spelled Lara, so Lara. Lara is looking at some, carvings on a wall that are depicting a certain mythological event in that culture, which is African culture, because this is in Ghana. And in those carvings, she, is reading them because she is so smart. And she mentions how the myths on the carvings are talking about the flood, the Great Flood, which is a myth that you see in a lot of mythologies all over the world. So I find it super fascinating that as humans, we either, communicated more than we thought, or we just, have the same ideas of how things work in the universe for the most part. And yeah, it's a little different with each culture. But those differences are what makes it fascinating, because it's the different perceptions of the way that people throughout history have decided to remember things. And memory is weird, which is another episode I kind of want to talk about at some point, is how memory is very strange. But anyway, so basically this idea comes from that. I remember I was thinking about it, and it was one of the things I definitely wanted to talk about. And I did not know until I looked it up that this topic specifically, comparative mythology, is actually more of a what is it called? An area of study for researchers, which I think is cool. Like, I should have gone into that. And I think that's fascinating, and I decided to look a little deeper into it. So here we go. This is what we're talking about. So the only article I have today that I'm looking at is called Comparative Mythology. It's by Wikipedia. And I know everyone's going to get on my butt right away and tell me that since it's by Wikipedia, blah, 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 it's not good and all that. Anybody can edit that. But look, I will argue to the death for Wikipedia. It is a hill I will 100% die on, because, Wikipedia may not be the 100% the best place to get all of your information from, but it offers resources. And if you're going to sit here and tell me that people change it all the time, they don't. There are people who vet the changes that are made, and if they're incorrect, they do change them back. So, maybe every once in a while someone will see something that's wrong, but for the most part, it doesn't happen very often. So I pulled this article from Wikipedia. I think it is interesting because it also talks about comparative mythology in a way that I did not think about. So here we go. Comparative mythology is the comparison of myths from different cultures in an attempt to identify shared themes and characteristics. Comparative mythology has served a variety of academic purposes. For example, scholars have used the relationship between different myths to trace the development of religions and cultures, to propose common origins for myths from different cultures, and to support various psychoanalytical theories. Pretty fucking cool. The comparative study of mythology reveals the transnational motifs that unify spiritual understanding globally. The significance of this study generates a broad, sympathetic understanding of these stories in human history. The similarities of myths remind humans of the universality in the human experience. So it's so fascinating. I love this, and this was probably going to be a long episode, so buckle in, because I could talk about this for a long time. So the background is how this kind of started. Anthropologist C. Scott Littleton defined comparative mythology as the symptomatic comparison of myths and mythic themes drawn from a wide variety of cultures. By comparing different mythologies, scholars try to identify underlying similarities and or to reconstruct a proto-mythology from which those mythologies developed. To an extent, all theories about mythology follow a comparative approach. As scholar of religion Robert Segal notes, same Robert Segal who's an actor? I don't know, weird. By definition, all theorists seek similarities among myths. However, scholars of mythology can be roughly divided into particularists who emphasize emphasize the difference between myths and comparativists who emphasize the similarities. Particularists tend to maintain that the similarities deciphered by comparativists are vague and superficial, while comparativists tend to contend that the difference etched by particularists are trivial and incidental. So there's kind of two camps to this subject, is focusing on the differences and focusing on the similarities. I was definitely, when I started thinking about this as a topic, I was like, I'm more interested in kind of the similarities and kind of drawing those lines to other myths. But I do think it is important to talk about the differences, because it really paints a picture of the culture and what we, it really shows how these people thought about things, and it's so cool, because you can't. It's ancient history. You can't pull out a phone and Google something, or, watch the news. It's not, I don't know. I just can't open up a history book, because history, in a lot of these cases, history just doesn't really exist yet. So I just find it fascinating. Comparative approaches to mythology held great popularity among 18th and 19th century scholars. Many of these scholars believed that all myths showed signs of having evolved from a thought which interpreted nearly all myths as poetic descriptions of the sun's behavior. According to this theory, these poetic descriptions had become distorted over time into seemingly diverse stories about gods and heroes. However, modern-day scholars lean more towards particularism, feeling suspicious of broad statements about myths. A recent exception is the historical approach followed by E.J. Michael Witzel's reconstruction of many subsequent layers of older myths. See, and that's my thing, is like, I love that, because I wouldn't say I'm here for the particularism of it, but I do enjoy this idea of, like, let's not put an umbrella over everything, because in life, that's not how things work. Everybody has a different perspective, and I think that maybe, yes, some of this could be talking about the sun's behavior. I think some of it could just be talking about natural disasters. I think some of it could be a way to explain, like, Persephone and Hades in Greek mythology. It's a way to explain why winter is the way it is, in a more palpable way. So it's, I don't think you should put an umbrella term like it's about the sun, even though the example I just used is kind of about that. But, you get it. So, comparative mythologists come from various fields, including folklore, literature, history, linguistics, and religious studies, and they have used a variety of methods to compare myths. I loved seeing that literature was involved here and linguistics, so I thought that was cool. I did not expect it. I maybe expected literature in some way, but linguistics was surprising. So for the linguistic part, speaking of, some scholars look at the linguistic relationships between the myths of different cultures. For example, the similarities between the names of gods in different cultures. One particularly successful example of this approach is the study of Indo-European mythologies. Scholars have found striking similarities between the mythological and religious terms used in different cultures of Europe and India. For example, the Greek sky god Zeus, Pater, Pater, the Roman sky god Jupiter, and the Indian Vedic sky god Deus, something, Dyaus, have linguistically identical names. This suggests that the Greeks, Romans, and Indians originated from a common ancestral culture, and that the names Zeus, Jupiter, and Deus, and the Germanic Tiu, of Tuesday. Okay, interesting. Evolved from an older name, Deus Piter, which referred to the sky god, or to give an English cognate, the Divine Father, in a Proto-Indo-European religion. An approach which is both historical and comparative was recently proposed by E.J. Michael Witzel. He compares collections of mythologies and reconstructs increasingly older levels parallel to, but not necessarily dependent on, language families. The most prominent common feature is a storyline that extends from the creation of the world and the humans to their end. This feature is found in the northern mythologies of Eurasia and the Americas, La Eurasia, while it is missing in the southern mythologies of sub-Saharan Africa, New Guinea, and Australia. Gondwana land. All right. Mythological phylogenies? Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Also are a potentially powerful way to test hypotheses about cross-cultural relationships among folktales. So that's the linguistic side, which is a bit complicated, but it's interesting. It's taking these words that are used in the mythology and basically tying them to each other. The same way you could do with different languages in general, because it's kind of like how when I talk to people about German versus English, English is very similar to German. And there is a lot of words that are shared between the two because English itself is a Germanic language. And then if you go into Spanish, Italian, and French, they all have very similar things that tie to each other because they're all derived from Latin. So, it's fascinating. So for structural, some scholars look for underlying structures shared by different myths. The folklorist Vladimir Prop proposed that many Russian fairy tales have common plot structure in which certain events happen in a predictable order. In contrast, the anthropologist Claude Levi-Strauss examined the structure of a myth in terms of the abstract relationships between its elements rather than their order in the plot. In particular, Levi-Strauss believed that the elements of a myth could be organized into binary oppositions, raw versus cooked, nature versus culture, etc. He thought that the myth's purpose was to mediate these oppositions, thereby resolving basic tensions or contradictions found in human life or culture. So yeah, this is all about how these myths have kind of a common story. And I actually, when I was thinking about doing this episode, I thought about that, and I would think of it at like when we talk about literature. In a lot of the literature classes I took in college, we talked about the hero's journey and how that is a very, very commonly used event. Very commonly used a sequence of events in many stories. So it's super interesting to talk about how even in these, mythologies and these stories that were supposedly, kind of true to these people, there was also common structure between a lot of them. So, psychoanalysis, some scholars propose that myths from different cultures reveal the same or similar psychoanalytic forces at work in those cultures. Some Freudian thinkers have identified stories similar to the Greek story of Oedipus, in many different cultures. They argue that these stories reflect the different expressions of the Oedipus complex in those cultures. Likewise, Jungians have identified images, themes, and patterns that appear in the myths of many different cultures. They believe that these similarities result from archetype present in the unconscious level of every person's mind. So yeah, that's fun. I think it is so fascinating. Like, there's so much you can take from this and put it all out there and be like, okay, what's the same? What's different? What does that tell us? It's fascinating. This is like the topic I should have gone into for history. Not that I still couldn't. I mean, I do more public history. Not. Now I'm not, like, working in a historical field, but if this was what it was, if this was my subject, I would love this. All right, so motifs. A motif is kind of, the overall story, and at least that's how I'm thinking of it. I could be wrong. So like the creation myth, that's a motif. A creation myth or cosmogonic myth is a symbolic narrative of how the world began and how people first came to inhabit it. While in popular usage, the term myth often refers to false or fanciful stories, members of cultures often ascribe varying degrees of truth to their creation myths. In the society in which it is told, a creation myth usually regarded as conveying profound truths metaphorically, symbolically, historically, or literally. They are commonly, although not always, considered cosmogonical myths. That is, they describe the ordering of the cosmos from a state of chaos or amorphousness. Yeah. Sorry, it feels good when you, see a word you've never, really said out loud and then you say it right. Creation myths often share a number of features. They often are considered sacred accounts that can be found in nearly all known religious traditions. They are all stories with a plot and characters who are either deities, human-like figures, or animals who often speak and transform easily. They are often set in a dim and non-specific past that historian of religion, Mircea Iliad, termed in Iliotempore at that time. Creation myths address questions deeply meaningful to the society that shares them, revealing their central worldview and the framework of the self-identity of the culture and individual in a universal context. Creation myths develop in oral traditions and therefore typically have multiple versions found throughout human culture. They are the most common form of myth. And I think anyone who knows anything about any kind of mythology or religion, there usually is always, how did we come to be? Where is who made us? Why are we here? That kind of thing. So, makes sense. Primordial chaos is the next motif. Chaos is the mythological void state preceding the creation of the universe. In Greek creation myths. In Christian theology, the same term is used to refer to the gap or the abyss created by the separation of heaven and earth. In Norse mythology, I'm not going to try to say the word, but the word means gaping abyss, or a yawning void, is the primordial void mentioned in the... I can't pronounce that either. What it mentions, it's like the Gylfaginning. It's the text that records Norse cosmology. Cosmogony. Okay, so chaos, the void, that kind of thing. And then creation of mankind from clay. The creation of man from clay is a theme that recurs throughout numerous world religions and mythologies. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, in Kiddu is created by the goddess Aruru out of clay. In Greek mythology, Prometheus molded men out of water and earth. Per the Hebrew Bible, quote, Genesis 2:7, and the Lord God formed man of dust and of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. In Hindu mythology, the mother of Ganesh, Parvati, made Ganesh from her skin. And lastly, in Chinese mythology, Nuwa molded figures from the yellow earth, giving them life and the ability to bear children. So yeah, creation of man is usually there, usually made of earth of some kind. I actually didn't know the Greek one, and I feel like I should have. But there you go, pretty cool. So first humans is another one. A protoplast from ancient Greek, first formed in a religious context, initially referred to the first human, or more generally to the first organized body of progenitors of mankind in a creation myth. So yeah, they always have like a first human. Numerous examples exist throughout history of a human couple being the progenitors of the entire human species. This would include, but is not limited to, Adam and Eve, of Abrahamism, Ask and Imbla of Norse mythology, and Fuxi and Nuwa of Chinese mythos. In Hindu mythology, Manu refers to an archetypal man. In Sanskrit, the term for human means of Manu, or children of Manu. The Manu Smriti is an ancient legal text and constitution among many studiers, I guess, or followers of Hinduism, and is believed to be a discourse given by Manu himself. So, cool. Acquisition of fire, I'm gonna try to, holy crap, I'm barely through, I'm like not even halfway through this article. So I probably will split this, and this might need to be 2 parts. And then, this is a lot. Because I was going to do kind of an overview, and then I was going to have some separate episodes here and there talking about more specific ones. But I can also kind of just skip through the motifs and get to the similarities and different ones. So we have the acquisition of fire for the benefit of humanity, the flood myth, and the dying god. Many myths feature a god who dies and often returns to life. So Jesus in Christianity, all that. So I'm just kind of like, I'll speed through these, but you kind of get the ideas that there are all these ideas that come across different mythologies, but they're all different in their story, but the idea is the same. There's the creation, there's mankind being formed, there's how mankind was able to use fire and how they were given fire. And then like the dying god, is there's usually a god that dies and returns to life and everything. So that's pretty much the pretty interesting little kind of like, we have all these things that are very similar, and yet most of these cultures are either, apart in time or apart in distance, and you can't imagine how any of the ideas would have been shared the way that you would think they have. So then, God, there's so much. There's so much of these founding myths, structure of hero narratives, astrological traditions, All right. And an end of the world myth. Oh, that's it. Okay, so there's no... I thought it had a section about myths that were similar. So let's just kind of go through some of these shortly. So where did I stop at? So yeah, the dying god. There's the creative sacrifice. Many cultures have stories about divine figures whose death creates an essential part of reality. So again, Jesus in Christianity. They seem especially common among cultures that grow crops, particularly tubers. One such myth from the Wemale people of Seram Island, Indonesia, tells of a miraculously conceived girl named Hainuwele, I'm probably saying it wrong, whose murder corpse sprouts into the people's staple food crops. The Chinese myth of Pangu, the Indian Vedic myth of Purusha, and the Norse myth of Ymir all tell of a cosmic giant who is killed to create the world, which is kind of cool because, like, one of my other subjects I kind of want to cover is talking about how anime tends to use anime and manga, and honestly any media in the world, you tend to use these mythological stories as the backbone or the idea or references. I hear the word Ymir and all I can think about is Attack on Titan and the use of the name to for the character who is basically the leader queen of the Titans, something like that. I don't remember exactly, it's been a while since I watched it, but you know, that kind of idea of just how that works. And so there's the Axis Mundi. It's basically, that's the center of the universe. So many mythological beliefs mention a place that sits at the center of the world and acts as a point of contact between different levels of the universe. So like, I know in Norse mythology there is like Asgard and Earth is... I forget which one Earth is. I should know. I've seen so much Marvel. But, you know, they have the different kind of areas. And then in ancient Greek, Delphi was the center of the universe, and that's where the prophetic oracle lived. And then there's... if you think about it, for Greece, there's also like Mount Olympus where the gods live. There's, you know, the underworld where Hades is king, and the dead go. So it's very interesting. The next one is the Deus Otiosus, which is a celestial supreme being who has cut off contact with humanity. Okay. The idol god is what that means. Let's see. There's a couple here. I mean, for Greek, they're mentioning the Titans. You know, Gaia, Uranus, Pontus, Tartarus. Oh no, those are not the Titans. That's... in Greek mythology, Chaos, the creator of the universe, disappears after creating primordial deities. Okay, so these are, yeah, the first gods, basically. Yeah, in mythologies of highly complex cultures, the supreme being tends to disappear completely, replaced by a strong polytheistic belief system. There's also, the next motif is Titanomachy, basically a creation myth of younger, more civilized gods and struggling against a group of older gods. So Greek mythology, there's obviously the Olympians versus the Titans. In Hindu mythology, there's the Devas and the Asuras. So gods versus demons. Yeah. And then giants. So there's usually giants. Usually, I see this a lot too. It's usually that giants are kind of the first attempt at humans that don't go very well. So I think that's kind of an interesting take on things. Yeah. So there's giants. Dragons and serpents are a very common theme. Ouroboros is one from Norse mythology. Or no, that's not Norse mythology. Egyptian iconography. And then Jormungandr, the world-eating snake. So there's that. Of course, founding myths, like Romulus and Remus. It's all very fascinating. Yeah, the Old Testament, the Israelites have a founding myth of their ancestors escaping enslavement from Egypt. I think we all know that. And if you don't know that one, you should go watch Prince of Egypt, because it's a fantastic movie. Hero narratives, human cannibalism, astrological tradition, types and systems. There's always usually an underworld. And if I hear another person call Hades, call him god of the underworld, but also refer to him in the same breath as like a Satan type character in Greek mythology, I'm gonna hit something, because he's not Satan necessarily. Not in the way that I think most people think of Satan as this evil being. Hades is just a king. All he does is run the underworld and make sure people go where they need to go. He's not necessarily evil. I mean, he's actually kind of portrayed as one of the better Greek gods, who's not as much of an asshole as the other Greek gods. So, but I digress. But it's not hell, so stop calling it that. It's just the underworld. It's the land of the dead. It's where all dead people go, not just some. You may go to the Fields of Punishment. Or no, not the Fields of Punishment. Is it the Field? I think it's Fields. The Fields of Punishment or the Fields of Asphodel. You may go to Elysium. Yeah. But it's not hell. So stop that. Okay, so our next, they talk about the underworld, and of course afterlife, like I just mentioned, in numerous mythologies and religions, and thus tying in the Orbis alias motif proper is the concept of an afterlife, wherein a perpetuated existence by which the essential part of an individual's identity on their stream of consciousness continues to live after the death of their physical body. And then end of the world is the last motif it mentions. End of the world or civilization, final battle between good and evil, and a new world will be created, Ragnarok, Armageddon, all of that. So, I have been talking for almost 40 minutes now about this. But all this to say that, we might be different in a lot of ways culturally between different countries and religions and all of that. But honestly, we're not that different. We have a lot of the same ideas about good and evil and how the world works and everything. Even before monotheism was really a major thing, in polytheism we believed these, there was a way to be good. There, when you died, you might go to a bad place or you might go to a good place, and I don't know, I find it just kind of humbling to think about how similar myths are across each other. So I would really very much like to do some episodes on very specific mythologies. However, I know a lot about Greek mythology, so I may not do too much of a deep dive on anything like that. I think it would be fun to do some lesser known like Greek myths, like the myth of Atlanta, I think is one we don't talk about a lot. And kind of maybe the myth of the bears, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and how that. I'd love to talk about constellations. And I definitely already have on my schedule an episode to talk about Norse mythology, as it was requested of me, so I will be planning to do that. And actually, the very next episode I'm going to be doing is talking about creatures, mythological creatures that we don't talk about very often. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and we're gonna explore some different worlds of mythology. So I will leave it at that, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me talk. If you're enjoying the show, please like, share, and subscribe. It really, really helps me out. All my social links are down below if you want to take a look at them, and maybe go follow me on Twitter or Instagram or on Facebook. My Patreon is always down there, so you can always follow me on there. I do post episodes there as well. I will be posting episodes to my YouTube. They should be on my YouTube by now, so otherwise, I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.